Episode 6, Economic Collapse, Dictators Rise, the Decade Liberty Lost. In this episode, we dive deep into one of the most dangerous decades of modern history, the 1930s. A decade in which a stock market crash led not just to a financial crisis, but to a global political earthquake. When democracy fails to deliver, who do people turn to? What will you learn in this episode? Why the 1929 crash wasn't just a Wall Street disaster, but the launchpad for authoritarian regimes across the globe. How economic despair morphed into political extremism, and how dictators seized the moment. The hidden mechanisms that turned unemployment lines into marching boots. The Great Depression, numbers that shook the world. In the US, by 1931, over 13 million Americans were unemployed, more than 25% of the workforce. Industrial production dropped by over 50%. From 1929 to 1933, over 5,000 banks collapsed. In Germany, inflation from World War I gave way to economic depression. Unemployment soared to 30%. Breadlines and hunger became part of daily life. In the UK and France, exports plummeted, factories shut down. Democratically elected governments struggled and mostly failed to contain the crisis. This wasn't just an economic failure. It was a crisis of belief. People lost faith in democracy and turned to strongmen who promised salvation. How dictators rose from the rubble. Hitler. In 1930, the Nazi Party had just 18% of the vote. By 1932, that number rose to 37%, fueled by promises of jobs, national pride, and revenge on the Treaty of Versailles. In 1933, Hitler legally became chancellor, and democracy died with applause. Mussolini, already in power, Mussolini used the Depression to consolidate fascism, expand censorship, and crush dissent. Stalin pitched the Soviet-planned economy as an alternative to capitalism. But at what cost? Between 3 to 5 million died in Ukraine alone during the Holodomor, a man-made famine. Japan. In 1931, the military bypassed civilian government and invaded Manchuria. This marked the rise of a militarized regime that would soon plunge the Pacific into war. Why did people support these regimes? Hunger, fear, and hopelessness made people vulnerable to radical solutions. Democracies failed to respond fast or effectively. Dictators offered certainty, order, and direction, even if through violence and fear. From economic collapse to political breakdown. On the surface, the 1930s were peaceful, but behind the scenes, armies were being rebuilt. Versailles was ignored. Fascism and communism were locked in ideological combat. Democracies were in retreat. The stage was set. War was no longer a question of if, but when. Next episode teaser. The world prepares for war. In episode 7, we rewind to the year 1914, the beginning of World War I. But with a unique lens, we'll analyze the military strength of each major nation, troop numbers, reserves, and modern weaponry, each country's territory size, population, and their influence on war strategy. Comparative insights into the German, British, French, Russian, Austro-Hungarian, and Ottoman armies, and how military commanders of each country saw war as honor, duty, or doom. A military view of World War I, not just from maps, but from within the ranks. Tell us in the comments, without the Great Depression, would Hitler or Mussolini have come to power? What critical mistakes did democratic governments make? Do you see any similarities between today's world and the 1930s? Like the episode, subscribe, hit the bell so you don't miss the next deep dive into history.